And today, a new report in Newsweek that U.S. intelligence agencies are telling the White House Iran has not restarted its nuclear weapons development program. Joining me live is Michael Isikoff, MSNBC contributor and investigative reporter for Newsweek. As always, good to see you, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's talk about the new reports out this week on Iran's nuclear capability, because the AP says an undisclosed International Atomic Energy report reveals Iran has developed the technological capability to build a nuclear weapon. Meanwhile, in your magazine, there's this article that says they're not restarting their nuclear weapons development program. Do we really know what's going on inside Iran right now?
The short answer is no, and that's the problem. The U.S. intelligence is extremely limited on what it knows about the precise status of Iran's nuclear program. We know there is a nuclear program. We know they're enriching uranium. What we don't know is how far along it is, and particularly whether it is close to acquiring a nuclear weapon. CIA Director Leon Panetta gave a very interesting interview to Voice of America just the other day, in which he emphasized this point, and he said our view is our intelligence is that they are proceeding to develop, the Iranians are proceeding to develop a nuclear capability in terms of power, but that there is still very much a debate going on within Iran as to whether or not they ought to proceed further. And Panetta is saying that could provide an opening for negotiation. So in spite of all the talk and all the concern, a lot of it legitimate, about Iran's nuclear program, here we have the top U.S. intelligence official saying that the best UN intelligence can figure out is that the Iranians are debating within themselves as to whether to take things to the next step to develop a nuclear weapon.
Okay, what about the downsizing of the proposed missile defense system under the Bush administration that we saw the steps, taken this week to do that? It was as a way to protect against possible Iranian missiles. That was the Bush administration intention there. Is this all part of an outreach to Iran in some way?
Well, I think actually it's part of a continued concern about Iran and switching the purpose of missile defense from some sort of vague Russian threat, which was never well defined since the end of the Cold War, to what American officials and Western officials view as a more likely threat, and that is capability from Iranian missiles. So that makes sense. If you're going to use missile defense, aim it at or direct it at the country that seems to be the greater threat.
Iran's also agreeing for the first time in almost 30 years to talk with the U.S. The U.S. seems to be staying the course and welcoming these talks despite other transgressions by the regime. Will any real progress be made on these discussions?
Very hard to know. The Iranians, it's interesting that President Ahmadinejad made the comments he did to Ann Curry, but at the same time, he gave this incredibly inflammatory speech yesterday in Tehran, in which he once again called the Holocaust a lie and said it was the religious duty of every Iranian to destroy the Zionist regime in Israel. Israel is a U.S. ally. One can understand why the Israelis would be concerned when they hear this kind of rhetoric from a country that does have a nuclear program, and it makes it yet harder for the Obama administration to try to develop a relationship of trust with Iran. And
Ahmadinejad will be at the UN this next week as he takes the world stage. You combine that with what we will expect to see at these talks. If we see little give and take from Iran ultimately, Michael, what happens next?
Well, there's clearly political pressure within the United States, within the Congress, to ratchet up sanctions against Iran. Secretary Clinton has pretty much said the same thing and has warned the Iranians that if we don't get progress on the nuclear front, if they don't agree to greater inspections with the International Atomic Energy Agency, if they don't become more compliant, that they're going to face sanctions. sanctions. That would probably just inflame the situation further. The Iranians, whether or not they would accede to the threat of sanctions is far from clear. So it is not a bright picture. It doesn't appear like there's much grounds for optimism on this front at all.
Okay, Michael Isikoff, good to talk with you as always. Thanks.
Thank you.
Log on to Newsweek.com to read the entire article on Iran's nuclear capabilities.